I just returned from a 3-week foreign trip, and as I was unpacking, I realized exactly how much personal electronic stuff had made the trip with me. That naturally raised the question as to how much of that was really needed or contributed something to the experience. If you're interested in travel, the question may have occurred to you also, so if you'll stick around, I'll give you my take on the subject, which you can agree with or not. Hi, I'm Gary, and I make videos on subjects that interest me, generally involving technology of some sort from a user point of view. Hopefully you'll find something interesting or informative in them also. I like to travel outside the U.S., and my wife and I are fortunate enough to have the chance to do it every year or so. I'm a compulsive sightseer, and what I really enjoy is taking photographs of the places we visit. We just came back from a 3-week trip to Scotland and England, where I lugged a backpack full of cameras and other electronic gear over there and back. If you're going to travel nowadays, particularly internationally, you kind of have to make decisions about how far to go with this. So my intention is to make 2 short videos on this subject. This one will address the question of how much of that stuff I really needed to make the trip a success, while the second one will deal with how to keep all those battery-powered thingies charged up and going. Now, I know perfectly well that your needs and choices will be different than mine. There's no intention on my part to tell you that my choices are the best answer for you. I'm just hoping to give you some actual information about my experience that you can react to, whether it's to say, that could work for me, or no way am I going to do that. If you're a generation or 2 younger than I am, some of you are already saying, my phone does everything I need to do. Why would I even think about carrying a bunch of other stuff? I will address that in a bit, but first I want to show you what I actually carried on this trip. This whole question depends to some sizable extent on what you're willing to lug onto an airplane. I use an ordinary backpack as an airline carry-on, because it doesn't advertise itself as full of expensive gear, and it can be stuffed into the overhead bins on even a 60-passenger regional jet, which is what we mostly get to fly on locally. Let me start unloading this thing. This particular pack has a laptop compartment at the back. My travel laptop is a Samsung Note 9 with a 13-inch screen that weighs only 1.8 pounds. And needs only this 45-watt power adapter. I carry a mouse because I hate trackpads, but that's just me. For this trip, I took 2 cameras. This one is a Nikon Z50 mirrorless. It uses an APS-C size sensor, so that lens covers the equivalent of 27 to 210 millimeters. But the combination only weighs about 25 ounces. There are also a couple of extra lenses, filters, extra memory cards, and not 1 but 2 USB-C solid-state drives for backing up the photos from both cameras. The second camera is a Sony RX100 V7, which has a non-interchangeable lens with an equivalent focal length of 24 to 200 millimeter. Its image quality is actually really good for its size, and it weighs less than 11 ounces. I'm emphasizing these weights because all these items are maybe half the weight of what I was using 5 or 6 years ago. I once took a trip where my carry-on weighed more than my checked suitcase, but this time it weighed in at only about 17 pounds. When you get to my age and condition, this can make the difference between going and staying home. Of course, there are extra batteries and chargers in this collection also, but that's a part of what I intend to cover in the next video, so I'll skip over that for now. There's also a phone. Even dinosaurs like me must have a phone. I use Google Fi for my cell phone provider, not because I particularly like it, but because it works in almost every country in the world, and it's really cheap when I'm at home. What else do we have? A power bank in case something needs charging desperately while I'm moving, a lithium battery rechargeable flashlight, a Garmin GPS watch, a pile of charging cords and miscellaneous chargers for all this, a very small SanDisk music player, and a pair of cheap Sony noise-canceling headphones. For the first time on this trip, I took with me a lavalier microphone and a small battery-powered video light, thinking I might get the chance to make a YouTube video during the trip. That didn't happen for several reasons, mostly because I packed it in my checked luggage. More on that later. My wife's needs are much simpler for traveling. She gets by with her phone, which doesn't work outside the U.S. but does on Wi-Fi, her Kindle e-reader because she reads a lot on trips, another music player, and her GPS watch. Keeping in mind that we're both over 80, this looks like a pretty substantial list for senior citizens. So the rest of this video is mostly going to explain why I find it worthwhile to lug this much stuff around instead of just relying on a phone. You may find that a phone meets your needs just fine. It certainly could for some, but it simply doesn't for me. First off, the cameras. Why the cameras? The best smartphone cameras are really good nowadays, are they not? Yes, they are. But I refuse to pay $1,000 or more for a premium smartphone as a matter of principle, so some of it may be down to stubbornness. But even the best smartphone cameras have two fatal drawbacks for me. They have limited zooming capability, and they don't have a real viewfinder. I take thousands of pictures on a trip, so a lens that zooms continuously from wide angle to a pretty long telephoto is worth every bit of the weight and space it consumes in saving me steps and time. And holding a phone out in front of me to take a photo is a recipe for disaster for me in two ways. I can't hold it steady enough, and sunshine makes it tough to see exactly what I'm doing. A viewfinder on a camera that you hold against your face fixes both these issues. But why two cameras, especially as they have fairly comparable image quality and zoom coverage? Well, to me, making it back with my photos is really all important. And I'm an engineer, so I believe in redundancy. I've actually only had one camera fail on a foreign trip in 25 years. But I don't want to be dead in the water if it does. I have friends that has happened to, and it was not fun. So, two cameras, extra batteries, memory cards, and charging methods are all needed to make me happy. In this case, the little Sony adds very little weight and bulk anyway, which is a huge improvement over my previous trips. And why a laptop computer? Nobody actually needs a laptop on a trip, do they? It's certainly true that you can do pretty much the same things with an iPad or some other tablet or even a high-end smartphone. But I like to check my photos at the end of every day to make sure nothing has gone wrong with the camera or its settings. Also, I use an image database at home for organizing my pictures. It's much less work and more reliable to label, caption, and keyword the photos every night than trying to remember all those places and things after I get back home. Examining and working with hundreds of photos is just easier on a bigger screen with a real keyboard and a mouse. And we had a problem on this trip that made me doubly glad to have it along. British Airways lost our luggage for 10 entire days, which meant a lot of online forms to be filled out and tracked, because no one ever answers the phone or responds to emails nowadays if they can help it. If you've ever had to type in a bunch of tiny boxes on a phone screen, you'll appreciate how much easier it is to use a laptop. The rest of the stuff is pretty minor in comparison, but it all does something that matters to me. The GPS watch gives me a location track that I can use to put GPS coordinates in my photos later. I'm aware that your phone will do this automatically if you keep location tracking turned on. And a lot of newer cameras, including mine, can do this in real time by linking to the GPS in your phone. But that means both the phone and the camera have to be turned on more or less continuously, which is bad for battery life. and I haven't found this scheme to work all that reliably either. The watch battery runs down in 4 to 5 hours with the GPS turned on, but the power bank can recharge it pretty quickly on the fly if necessary. I like to listen to my own music rather than some streaming service, so the music player does that nicely, again without having to keep my phone turned on during a 10-hour transatlantic flight just for that. The full-size headphones don't make my ears hurt or fall out like earbuds do, and they plug in with a cord because Bluetooth hasn't worked well for me with cheap headphones. If I did this more often, I'd buy some good ones, but these work well enough to drown out jet engine noise and crying babies. And the flashlight is way brighter and more focused than my phone. So the engineer in me says it's worth the 2 ounces it weighs. So there you have it. One man's collection of travel electronic stuff and the reason it works for me. Like I said before, you decide what's important enough for you to carry around. The only item in this collection I actually regret taking on this trip is the super wide-angle lens I never got to use for night sky photography because of cloudy skies and my tripod being lost with my lost luggage. I will say that the older I get, the less hassle I'm willing to put up with. I gave up on heavy cameras on neck straps several years ago because my neck simply wouldn't tolerate them for a whole day of sightseeing. But today's lighter weight gear makes it possible to carry most of what I really want without a big penalty in either weight or performance. And I can use a lightweight harness instead of a neck strap for the lighter gear also. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a like on YouTube. And by all means, please subscribe to the channel. I don't know how many people ever use that notification bell thing, but there is going to be a second video in this series to address the question of how to keep all those battery-powered devices charged up so they can actually be used on a lengthy trip. So I'm hoping you'll check that out when it becomes available. In the meantime, thanks for watching. I'll leave you with a few photos from our trip.